You know, when I was a kid and I heard Led Zeppelin the first time, one of the things that I really was blown away by was the drum sound. I had really never heard anything like that. Now, part of it is John Bonham's playing was incredibly unique. He used really big drums and it was just a massive sound. And I always wondered how they got that Led Zeppelin drum sound. So years and years later, I became a record producer. And I went back to the old Zeppelin records. I started with Zeppelin 1. I listened to the drum sounds. Now, that record was engineered and mixed by Glyn Johns. And Zeppelin 2, 3, 4, and most of the other ones were actually engineered and mixed by his brother, Andy Johns. Just to give you an idea of how many records these two brothers did in the 60s and 70s and 80s, let's see, Glyn Johns worked some on Let It Be. He worked with the band. He worked with the Faces. He worked with Boz Scaggs. He worked with Humble Pie. He worked with Graham Nash, the Rolling Stones, The Who. He did most of the Who records he produced and engineered and mixed. The Eagles, Neil Young Harvest, Eric Clapton, Eagles Desperado. I mean, just so many massively big records. That was Glyn Johns. And Andy Johns worked with, let's see, Jethro Tull, Jack Bruce, Blind Faith, Zeppelin 2, Zeppelin 3, Highway by Free, Zeppelin 4, Sticky Fingers of Stones, Mott the Hoople, Exile on Main Street, Goat's Head Soup, Houses of the Holy, Physical Graffiti. I mean, these guys did all these massively big records. But if we're talking about John Bonham's drum sound, it's basically Glyn Johns on Zeppelin 1 and Andy Johns on all the rest of the records. Let's take a listen to John Bonham soloed. Okay, before we discuss Bonham's drum sound, we need to discuss his drum kits, and he played a bunch of them. The kit that he played on the first Zeppelin record was actually a 4-piece kit. It was a Ludwig green sparkle that had a 22 by 14 kick drum, 13 by 9 rack tom, and 16 by 16 floor tom, along with his chrome 402 superphonic snare drum, Ludwig snare drum. This drum kit, you'll notice if you listen to Zeppelin 1, you don't hear that second floor tom because he actually didn't start using that until Zeppelin 2. In late 68 and early 69, Zeppelin toured with Vanilla Fudge, which featured drummer Carmine Appice. Now, Carmine was playing a drum kit with 2 huge kick drums, 26 by 14. Bonham then ordered a kit from Ludwig that featured a 26 by 14 kick drum, a 14 by 12 inch rack tom, a 16 by 16 floor tom, and an 18 by 16 floor tom. Along with this kit, he ordered cymbals from Peisty, a 15 inch sound edge hi-hat, an 18-inch giant beat medium crash, a 20-inch giant beat medium crash, and a huge 24-inch giant beat medium ride cymbal. The giant beat crash cymbals were actually replaced in 1971 by the 2002 Peisty models, which are still being manufactured today. Bonham adopted those and played them for the remainder of his career. He also had a 16-inch crash, and along with the 18-inch and 20-inch crashes, so he would change out his cymbals throughout his career. The maple kit that he got from Ludwig in 1969, he used it for 69 and 70, and that was replaced in 71 by a green sparkle kit with the same sizes, which he played from 71 to 73. From 73 to 75, he played an amber Vista Light kit, and then that was replaced by a silver sparkle kit, which included a 15 by 12 tom instead of the 14-inch rack tom. The silver sparkle kit was actually used at the same time as when he had his stainless steel kit made from 1977 to 1980, which also included a 15-inch rack tom. This is a 1971 16 by 16 Ludwig floor tom. One of the things you will notice about it is that it is a 3-ply drum with a maple reinforcement hoop. When I say a 3-ply drum, I mean there is 1 ply, a 16-inch ply of maple, 1/8-inch ply of poplar, 16-inch ply of maple again, so 3 ply. On the top and bottom, it has a maple reinforcement hoop that you can see here. That helps the drum stay round. Most high-end drums from that era, no matter what the brand was, whether it was Rogers, whether it was Ludwig, whether it was Slingerland, Leedy, they used the same construction of a 3-ply drum, maple, poplar, maple, along with a maple reinforcement hoop. This is a Leedy kick drum. It's a 24 by 14 that has the exact same kind of construction. The same thing goes for Rogers. All these different drum companies constructed drums in the same way. So if you're looking to get a vintage drum kit to get that same sound that John Bonham had, you don't necessarily have to just have Ludwig drums. John Bonham used Emperor coated heads on the top for some of his drum kits. Later on, you'll see him use the controlled sound or the black dot clear. On his Vistalite kit, he would use those. But early in his career, he'd use a 2-ply coated ambassador on the batter head, the head that you hit with a stick. And on the resonant head on the bottom, he would use a single-ply ambassador clear. Now, one of the things about vintage drums that if you go to a drum store today and buy a drum kit, rims. This is a vintage rim here. Okay, now vintage rims were 1.6 millimeters. Any drum kit that you buy today that has a triple flange hoop like this will have a 2.3 millimeter hoop. So the hoop is actually heavier on new drums. The difference between a 1.6 millimeter hoop and a 2.3 millimeter hoop is that the 1.6 millimeter hoop on the vintage drums has less mass, so it actually makes the drum lighter and more resonant. So if you're going to try to get that vintage drum sound, that is a part of it. If I buy a new drum kit, I will go out and just buy some 1.6 millimeter hoops to put on it. The next thing is the Superphonic snare, the Ludwig Superphonic 402. So the 402 snare was a 6.5 by 14 inch chrome snare, metal snare. And if you buy a new one, once again, it will come with 2.3 millimeter hoops. This was a new snare when I bought it 10 years ago or so, and I replaced it with lighter 1.6 millimeter hoops. And I know that because when I played one of my friend's 1970s snare, his Superphonic, it was much lighter. And he said, oh, that's because they used to use lighter rims on all the drums. And then when I started buying vintage drums, I compared my new drums to them. I took that when I was changing the heads. I was like, wow, there's a real difference. These are much lighter, and the drum is more resonant because of that. So I immediately swap out the hoops on these. Bonham would typically use an Emperor on the top head of the snare, and then on the bottom head of the snare, he might use a clear ambassador or a diplomat. I think it would really depend. In regards to the kick drum, one of the things that you'll notice in every picture is this felt strip that goes across the front of the resonant head. If you take a look at this 26 by 14 inch kick drum, you'll notice I have a felt strip that goes across here. It's stretched here when I change the heads so that when you hear it, it doesn't just ring out of control. Okay, there's two more elements of this John Bonham sound. One of them is the drum tuning. Bonham used to tune his drums like a jazz player, really high. So when you hear the toms, they have a really high sound. As a matter of fact, listen to this fill. You'll notice that the drums are super high tuned. This is one of the ways that he could use really large drums but still have them project. If they were tuned really low, like today's rock drummers, you wouldn't have that Bonham sound. That's a crucial part of his sound, is the drum tuning. The other thing is the Glyn Johns 3-mic recording technique. Glyn Johns produced the first Zeppelin record. And there's a great video of him that you can see here where he's explaining how he does it.
All the time. Okay, so they're approximately within an inch or two, the same distance from the sailor. And that's it. And it takes 2 minutes. It actually takes about 3 seconds. You lift the 2 faders up, and there's your drum sound.
You don't need to have really nice high-end condenser mics. U47s. I have some just AKG 414s here. I mean, they are nice, large diaphragm condensers. But one of the things that he talks about, he's got his overhead mic here picking up the cymbals, which I don't have here so that you can see, and the snare drum and the toms. And then this one is picking up the floor tom. It's facing the center of the snare. And it's also picking up a lot of the kick drum. But we also have the mic on the front of the kick drum. I usually start in the center of the kick. As you can see here, I have an AKG D30, which is a mic from the 50s and 60s that they actually would have used on Zeppelin records. But you can use an RE20 or any mic that's a good bass drum mic. So the rule of thumb for this, Glyn says in the video, it doesn't matter, he just eyeballs it. But I would say, if you're sitting on your stool playing, I mean, I'm a little bit low now, but you can reach your stick up here. I reach up here with my right hand. I can pretty much touch the diaphragm. I go over here, same distance. That's usually a good way to tell. It's probably, that's about 44, 45 inches away, and so is that. That will give you a very accurate picture of the drum kit. If you take this mic and pan it halfway over to one side, take the top mic, pan that halfway over. You don't want to be hard panned because it'll sound weird. It's going to move the snare out of the center of the image, but you notice on Zeppelin records that the snare is not dead in the center of the image. Blend in the kick drum, okay, the close mic there, that'll give you the big kick sound. Sometimes Glyn said he would put up a 57 on the snare or some type of a snare mic, but he ended up not using that very often. But I will myself mic the snare with a 57 and sometimes bleed that in, depending on how hard the drummer's hitting. Gives you a great snapshot of the kit, and it will give you that John Bonham drum sound. Some of you are going to say, well, what about the drum sound and when the levee breaks? Well, that's a completely different thing. That was done on Zeppelin 4. They used 2 room mics. Andy Johns did 2 biodynamic ribbon mics in the stairwell at 2 different heights. He used a Benson echo on the drums. When you listen to it, you can hear that there's an actual echo on it. That's why the beat sounds like it does. He does that on some other Zeppelin tracks, but this is really more focused on the main Bonham drum sound. So just to recap, the drum setup, the drum tuning, the microphone setup, placement are all crucial. But the most crucial thing is being able to play as well as John Bonham if you want that sound. That's all for now. Please subscribe here to my Everything Music YouTube channel. If you're interested in the Beato book, go to my website at www.rickbeato.com. And remember, follow me on Instagram at rickbeato1. Thanks for watching.